How much is your recycling habit really worth if billionaires' private jets are emitting hundreds of times more CO2 than the average person? A recent study reveals a shocking 46% jump in private jet emissions since 2019, driven by the ultra-wealthy. Let's break down who's behind these emissions and the staggering impact they're having on the climate. While the general population focuses on reducing waste, using paper straws, and driving eco-friendly cars, a tiny group of the super-rich is adding to pollution at unprecedented levels. A new study led by researchers at Linnaeus University in Sweden uncovers just how big the gap really is. The private jets of the ultra-wealthy produced a staggering 15.6 million tons of CO2 in 2023, up a full 46% since 2019. To put it into perspective, the wealthiest jet owners are generating 500 times more CO2 than the average person in a year, some even more. So who exactly are these frequent flyers? The study highlights that high-profile names, including pop superstar Taylor Swift and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, are leading the pack. According to research, the wealthiest jet owners collectively flew for nearly 26,000 hours across more than 4 million flights just last year. Many of these flights were short. Almost half of all private flights in 2023 covered less than 310 miles, and a notable 5% were less than 31 miles. That's a trip that could easily be made by car or train, especially in areas with extensive public transport options. It's not just their mileage that's under scrutiny, it's also the carbon footprint these flights leave behind. In fact, on average, each private jet flight emits around 3.6 tons of CO2, about the same amount an individual in the UK produces annually. Taylor Swift's flights alone in 2022 clocked in at nearly 23,000 minutes, producing over 8,000 tons of CO2. Similarly, Jeff Bezos's two jets emitted as much carbon in 2023 as the average American would over a staggering 207 years. What's even more surprising is the primary purpose behind these trips. According to Professor Stephen Gosling, the study's lead author, private jet use tends to spike on weekends and during summer months, suggesting that most flights are for leisure rather than business. And yet, in the U.S., these flights can often be written off as tax-deductible business expenses, further complicating efforts to curb emissions. The data also reveals patterns around high-profile events. Private jet usage soars during major global gatherings. During COP28, the climate summit in Dubai, 644 private flights generated nearly 5,000 tons of CO2. At the 2022 FIFA World Cup, 1,846 private flights produced a jaw-dropping 14,700 tons of CO2. Even international conferences aimed at addressing global issues are attended by hundreds of private jets. Of the 595 aircraft that flew to the World Economic Forum in Davos, 172 also went to the Cannes Film Festival, highlighting an overlap that may hint at inefficient resource use and carbon footprints. Although private jets only make up a small fraction of total global emissions, the study's authors argue that the ultra-rich have a disproportionate responsibility to mitigate their carbon footprint. With 68% of all private jets registered in the U.S. alone and only a small 4% of the global population owning these jets, policies targeting emissions from this elite group could have a significant impact. Professor Gosling proposes several measures, implementing a carbon fee of approximately $600 per ton of CO2, stopping tax write-offs for leisure flights disguised as business, and significantly raising landing fees to deter short flights. He concludes, if we don't ask the highest emitters to bear the cost of their emissions, how can we ask anyone else to make sacrifices for the climate? That's a wrap for today's video. Let us know what you think in the comments. Should the wealthy be paying more for their carbon footprint? And don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to AU News for more updates on the world's biggest issues.